I was called the Marisa Mayer of Russia. That's basically the nickname they gave me. So at 26, I found myself very, very high up, and I had no clue why. I was extremely insecure, and I was definitely thinking that everyone is after me. That lack of quote-unquote experience and competencies with a mix of a deep feeling of loneliness that you're really alone on this path. I was multiple times in a burnout, for sure. And
how did you recover from that?
My guest today is Olga Skipper. She is an executive coach to startup founders and top executives. She was a high-level tech executive at companies like Yandex at the young age of 26. She now works with founders and C-level leaders in startups, helping them navigate burnout, identity, and the psychological weight of leadership.
You mentioned that you were diagnosed with ADHD.
when I was 8, I was diagnosed. It was very rare.
For you, what was the best piece of advice that you received to become a better leader?
To lose my ego.
We want to thank one of our sponsors for supporting this podcast. WonderTax is a platform that makes your tax declaration in Germany easy. Try it out for free and only submit if you're fully satisfied. Visit gutentag.wondertax.de and give it a try. Now, without further ado, let's start with the conversation.
Olga Skipper, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Lord. This is a very nice intro. Thank you.
You went from small startups at your 20s. And then I think around your 20s, when you were 26, you were already like VP at a global company. When the speed of success slows down, what happens inside of you? How was this process of going in your 20s into a big company and having a lot of responsibilities and then moving across countries?
So at 26, I found myself very, very high up. And what you describe as the speed of achievement, what I think for a lot of people, even not thinkable of achieving like till their 40s or something like that, I did when I was 26, and I had no clue why. And I ended up in one of the biggest internet companies in Europe and tried to figure out what am I actually doing here and why I actually landed here. And this story stays with me even till this moment, despite of the fact that I sometimes don't feel it's the most impressive part. But it stays because for a lot of people, that jump or that rush felt very interesting. For me, it felt like someone threw me out of the window and told me, now you need to fly. And I had no clue how to fly from there. But the speed of the achievement, I wouldn't say it slowed down throughout my life. It just became more targeted and more thought through, I guess, but also more mine. Before it was more like I was like the wave was taking me somewhere.
You were, when you were at 26, it was when you were VP at Yandex.
Mm-hmm.
Yandex, for those who are not familiar with it, what is it?
It's by that time, it was the third biggest search engine in the world that was serving Russian-speaking communities. Kazakhstan, Turkey, and some other countries, I guess, but it's the third biggest search engine in the world by that time.
Wow. So it was like you were like basically in the Google from Russia.
I was called the Marisa Mayer of Russia. That's basically the nickname they gave me because also, and you need to understand that part of the story, a very young girl at that age becoming vice president and then switching also, that's the second part of the story, switching to a venture fund. I was a really good PR story. So I got a lot of labels for that.
How did that happen? How did that, let's say, accelerated success affected you, or how did that build up to you? Because 26 and becoming such a in such a leadership role, it's quite impressive. How did that happen?
There is a story how did it happen and a story how it affected me. And how did it happen was that I was a part of a mobile company, and that like now we're at the AI age. And that time mobile was the thing. So everyone was building mobile apps, mobile websites, mobile something. And we were one of the first companies that were actually really understanding what it means. And the company was bought because we became then the mobile part of Yandex. So the mobile expertise didn't exist. And we were the first ones to actually have this expertise and then sell part of that to the search engine to be able to continue them to be on mobile, because before that it was always on desktop. So that was the part how I became that. And I was the first marketing person in the initial team that was sold. How it hit me, I think I'm still unpacking it, like how it really affected me in a way, because sometimes right now when I coach my clients that are slightly either in the same age or like till they're 32, and I see them, I'm like, oh, it's really close to my skin.
Yeah.
That lack of quote unquote experience and competencies with a mix of hunger and force that they're bringing with them, but also a deep feeling of loneliness that you're really alone on this path, and alone from all possible perspectives, like your family, your friends, your community. Sometimes your country is different, right? Because you told the listeners that I moved, right, so many times. It's a very mixed feeling to be there. Yeah.
I mean, they say it at the top, it gets lonelier. Lonely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How many hours were you working to be noticed by your managers? You were someone who was working like 10, 12 hours a day?
It's a very interesting question because basically, I never counted how many hours I worked. Work was just the focus, and that's it. That's the dot, right? So I had this conversation once when I was like, I think like I was 25 or something. I was sitting in a ice cream shop with a friend of mine, and he looked at me and he's like, "Why are you working so much?" And I think what he didn't understand at the time were two things. One, I really loved my job, which means that it consumed all of the spaces, right, in between, in like all the time that I could actually possibly invest into that. But the other part, my life outside of my job was not really interesting and also sometimes very traumatizing. So I was escaping into work. And how did my manager notice me, or how did like the CEO of the company at the end of the day notice me, was because I was the loudest, I was the most present, and I was the most buy-in. Like I was like, it was my company at the end of the day, right? And I think for a lot of people that still remember that company, they would maybe remember 3 people, and I'm one of them.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's the thing I always have wondered with some people who just work too much for someone else's dream. I always wonder, what's your drive? Because probably back then and still today, I mean, if you are working there the 12, 15 hours and you treated the company as yours, of course, your boss going to love that.
Yeah.
But at the end of this day, it's his company, not yours. So the big wins will go always for him, or the glory will go for him at the end of the day. What is the thing that actually, I mean, you mentioned that it was like some traumatic part of your private life, but did you ever consider this kind of thought like, okay, wait a minute, for who am I working for? And why
I was
I'm doing
working
it?
for myself. I think this is the thought that, oh, I'm working for someone else and someone else is bearing the fruits, etc. For me, it's never the case. I never think in this way. Why? Because I do the job I like and I do the job that serves me, right? And at that time, so for you to understand, I was a poor student, right? And I was studying almost like 2 things parallel. So me getting a job at all, like at that particular company, 20, it was about being exposed to a bigger world. And I was traveling like 3 weeks out of the month. So if you name a country, I can tell you a restaurant in that country you need to go to. If you name me a city, I can tell you like how, I don't know, what the streets are and how people are, etc. So throughout that experience, I gained so much. And yes, monetary at the end of the day, when you look at the P&L or like, I don't know, the who is owning the company or what is happening financially, maybe we could say, oh, you could ask more or something. But in that part of my life, for me in that chapter, I was getting so much and it was for me. I
Yeah.
did it for myself. I did it for no one.
When you had this position that was in Switzerland, as far as I understand, right,
Yeah.
in your curriculum.
Yeah.
But you originally come from Russia, and you said that you moved in your early days to Germany. How has being Russian in Germany shaped the way people read you and the way you read yourself?
It's very complex. I don't think even I can read myself fully. So sometimes I'm sitting and I'm like, oh, that comes from here, or that comes from this experience, or etc. But because the complexity, let's make it more complex. So I'm born in Russia, but my ancestors are like Central Asia, Lithuania, and Estonia. So there is also this mix of Asian culture and Baltics that I hold within myself. But then I grew up between Germany and Russia, which on top I even call I have two separate childhoods, basically. I had one in Russia and I had one in Germany. And I think for Germans, if they don't really know that complexity and they meet me for the first time, they think I'm German and just sometimes talk weirdly, or I use some Austrian or Swiss words or dialect. Yeah, because I lived in both of those countries as well. So I think they might place me somewhere like Frankfurt, Hessen, so somewhere like Bavaria, maybe even at some point. For myself personally, I discovered the other day, this Nettes Mädchen, the podcast. There is a podcast in Berlin. I love them. I just adore them. There are two ladies that their background, they're Russians, but they were brought by their parents when they were little to Germany. So it's like 90s. And they grew up in Germany. So their background, families are Russian, but they are Germans actually. And they talk a lot about this multicultural experience. So when they talk, I'm like, I feel home. I feel understood, seen, home. There is also one artist that they invited there, and she sings this a little bit of Russian folk songs, but in German. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
It's very close to skin. It's very close to skin.
When did you move to Germany? How old were you?
I went on and off. So from the age of 10 till 15, I really was basically jumping back and forth. So that that part of my life from 10 to 15, I was in both the locations. And I finally moved to Germany 2013. But in between, there were a lot of countries.
Okay. So, so your roots, your childhood memories, or everything, it's Russian, basically.
Both.
All the references.
Germany and Russian, yeah.
Because you said how the way you connect with this other podcast and some of the reference, or maybe even the sense of humor they use there, or I don't know, TV shows or music.
How they describe their mothers. That's really interesting. Like when Valeria is one of their ladies and she was describing her mother, and I'm like, oh, I know what you mean. And then her German way of answering, and I'm like, I also know how you feel that. Because a lot of this, I think my mom did a good job for herself and a bad job at the same time, sending me to Germany, because I became so much more independent, but at the same time, culturally slightly distant to my family.
I had to see a lot that, for example, in the US, happens a lot between the Latino community and how they describe their moms and how they were raised very different as their other American mates, and the difference of how they were raised or how they are questioned about even things like how do you handle relationships, what your mom or your dad says at home is very different than the other Americans one. So it's always very funny how a lot of people connect through this experiences with their parents and the different as a raising culture probably. Yeah. And then when you start when you look back at your time? I mean, the mobile company you said was like Skyrim, right?
Skyrim was later. So
okay,
first it was SPB Software, and SPB Software we had two parts, and then one of them we sold to Yandex. Yeah.
And then when you start this path into leadership roles, do you feel that you were ready for it?
No.
And how do you handle all the nuances of becoming a leader and what it means? What are walk me through that experience.
I think you need on top of that to add that I'm from tech startup industry, right? Which means that leadership development usually doesn't really happen to founders and to people that are in the C-level, and you're just learning by doing. So at some point I found myself, and this is also what was my path to coaching, I found myself with like a hole within me of leadership competencies, and I couldn't put a finger what is actually in there. I just knew I'm lacking certain things, but since I was never exposed to them also in my experiences prior, I was like, there is leadership. It should be well-researched field, and it should be also teachable and learnable. I have no clue what it is about, because everything what I was doing before that was learning by doing. It was basically me showing the worst parts of me and parts of self to other people and trying to navigate who am I here at all? Like, why am I even leading people without the actual knowledge of that? So that whole led me to then leadership development.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of misconceptions that exist around leadership or about what it means to be a leader, and the difference to be a boss. For example, there's some people who think that these two are the same, and they think that as soon as they get a manager position, they are like, okay, now I'm the boss. But it's very different if you say, no, you are the leader. And being a leader, it sometimes means something very different. And now we have also different leading styles, like the servant leader, right? You're there for the team. And that's also something that also stuck a lot with me, because also from one day to the other, I was suddenly had to lead a team because my manager left. So I was appointed to be the next one. And even the hard thing was like the first time I needed to show up to the first meeting with the team, with my team. And now, like, how do I show up myself without saying like, oh, here, I'm the new boss? But I don't want to be like the cool teacher, like,
hi, I'm the boss.
Yeah, I'm the boss. Yeah, it's okay. No, it's everything. Yeah,
I know what you mean.
Very different how to manage it. Which type of leader do you think you were back then? You were like the bossy one, like when you were still in your learning path?
I was very insecure. I was extremely insecure, and I was definitely thinking that everyone is after me. And after to find me to like drag me down or something like that. I was also very afraid to say I don't know, or to ask for an advice, but it was a combination, unfortunately. The combination was because at certain roles that I had, I was also left alone to do things, which was like a blessing and the curse at the same time. A blessing because I could do whatever I want, but the curse is all the mistakes are mine, right? And I think like with SPB, for example, the first company, I was really blessed having a mentor and a person who was there with me 24/7 and was really curating, I would say, my leadership style. So telling me like, that's not great. That's not how you talk to people, or think twice. But later down the line, I was left alone, right? It means that whatever was instilled within me back then, I was carrying me myself, but the rest, I had to figure it out. And the ego of a 20-year-old, right? The ego of someone who is just starting and wants to prove herself wasn't letting me to either like look for help, ask certain questions, not make mistakes they're not supposed to be. But I was definitely pain in the butt for sure for a lot of people.
And I don't know, like in the literature, I don't know how advanced was it back then, or like resources to learn that, if it was not like a seminar for leaders or so on. For me, the one book that transformed the way of seeing leader or becoming a leader was the Radical Candor.
Yeah.
That book shifted a lot of my mind of, okay, how actually you can be a leader without being too nice and without being too harsh or to be like an asshole. That was like a transforming book for me. For you, what was the best piece of advice that you received to become a better leader?
To lose my ego, for sure. And I think that, like, we're talking about my first, like, the CEO of the company that I was sold, right? He was very good and not putting me down, but at the same time telling me that that's my ego at place right now, and we need to tone it down. We need to make sure that you become more humble, right? And I think that's that upbringing, and also like the city that I'm from, especially, it always in me that even if I don't know, I have a bigger pants in the room, right? So I don't know, I'm a bigger boss. I don't know, I know more, etc. I would never impose that on people because maybe it's irrelevant. Maybe someone else's genius is something else. So you never know whom you're talking to, but you also need to treat people nicely, right? And I think that treat people nicely also help them to hold their face sometimes and be a nice human being. That's the advice I would give everyone. Yeah.
Many high performers have some traits that mirror ADHD, like intensity, recklessness, speed. How do you help them to channel instead of being fighting against them? And for disclosure, you mentioned that you were diagnosed with ADHD.
Yeah, when I was 8, I was diagnosed, and it was by accident, and it was very rare. First of all, because girls usually do not get diagnosed. Secondly, because girls in that age at that time when I was 8 were not diagnosed at all. And only because my parents insisted on that, I was actually brought to the diagnosis. It basically lives with me till today, right? So sometimes people grow out of that as children. So you just sit and wait and they grow out of that. It's a very like a flat explanation of that, but bear with me. But I didn't, right? So I carry my ADHD every single day with me.
Why is it not diagnosed so often in girls? It's like the way that boys manifested is more obvious when they're like in the typical school situation and they can just do the homework or pay attention. How does it manifest in girls?
There are usually two parts. One is when you think about ADHD, you usually think about hyperactivity. And that's just one of, I think, 7 types of ADHD that you can have. So depending on the researcher, they all have their own types of ADHD. Sometimes it's also called ADD, blah, blah, blah. But the main reason hyperactivity is not the core symptom for ladies, for girls specifically, and this gets kind of dismissed. The second part, kind of culturally, depending where you're from. In my culture, boys were allowed to run around and do whatever. Girls needed to learn to sit down and focus from a very early age. So like behave, be a good girl. And I think that masking skill is actually developed much earlier in girls than in boys. So for example, if we talk about ADHD, you can technically potentially start diagnosis from the age of 4. It's better to go a little bit later down the line, but even from the age of 4 already, like for 4 years, the girls are told, sit down, be a nice girl, be still, misbehaving is not cool. For boys, it's easier. And I think the combination of the two, the societal, how society sees that, but also symptomatical, like how your ADHD is formed. That's what leads to boys being diagnosed more. Just because sometimes it's also then easier to explain, oh, okay, he has ADHD. It's fine. I know.
And did you see like throughout your years and then getting into the professional world, did you see that as an impediment or as a superpower for you?
Both, for sure. Because I find things that people find easy very hard for me, and I find things that people find very hard very easy for me. So it's literally the opposite sometimes. Like for example, I don't know, preparing clothes in the morning for my daughter, I find very hard, or dressing her up. Just because like focusing, like small things, etc., it's extremely hard for me. So I put a lot of effort into that. But sitting and talking to you, I have no issue. But knowing like I have a podcast myself, knowing other people for other people, it's like, nerve-wracking, or being risk averse. I'm very like, I can take risks every single day. I don't mind. I like adrenaline and cortisol. This is what my system likes. I can go on the street to a person and start talking to them. I don't mind. For a lot of quote unquote neurotypical people, that there might be a barrier. But bookkeeping, no one likes bookkeeping, but especially ADHD people, we really don't like bookkeeping and stuff like every single stuff that needs repetition.
Yeah.
Repetition, consistency, and consistent state. That's not what I'm really good at.
Interesting. There's some stuff that I get reminded by my wife that maybe I should check if I have ADHD, because some of the behaviors that from an ADHD person, I tend to have some of these stuff. But on the other hand, I sometimes feel that some of these are advantages. I'm like, yeah, I have problem of reading a book at once or reading the manual without getting distracted. But on the other hand, I can do 2 or 3 things at the same time. And sometimes I feel like, is it like a special quality of being able to do more? However, in things of setting projects, I have it difficult because I will sometimes start multiple things when I should be focused just on making one project work. And when I became when I jumped into leadership role, I kind of liked that ability of being able to change context very quickly, because you enter a meeting and then the next time you need to coach someone with what they're doing. And then the next hour you need to do something else. And then you have another meeting and then you have to do some work. And all of this shifting context was okay for me. But other people will say, I hate distractions. I just need to focus like for 5 hours straight in one thing, which is something I can't do.
But you're touching on a very important thing, right? And you asked me about my quote unquote success story, right? I don't think I would be successful in my life as much as I am if my job wouldn't be straightforward, the leadership job. My first job, more or less, right? I had jobs before, like I started working when I was 16. But if you look at like the first job that really formed me, I was hired and immediately I had the first or second report and I was the third person in the company. I don't think that I would get that speed if I would be put into, let's say, traditional company, corporate, etc., because I would be so demotivated, so bored, and so tired just of like trying to go through the levels, right? But immediately my
the sense of ownership, maybe.
Sense of ownership, the speed of the company, the responsibility, the changing context that what you were saying, right? So all my superpowers were needed in that time. And I wasn't stuck somewhere where some other person would find totally fine and normal. But for me personally, I can't survive there.
Yeah, I can imagine. Then you have to fit a mold, and then you have to follow a structure. And if you want to go up, you need to wait 1 year or a year and a half until you have your performance review, and then let's see, and then all of these very slow process, right?
Yeah, which is needed to maintain the company, right?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people, when they try to judge that, they judge the speed, of course, but for them personally, but on the scale of the company, when the company is established, you need those things because that's what keeps the elephant in the same room.
Yeah.
But it's not for me, and maybe not for you as well, right? So
yeah. When these kind of work or in work-life balance became something unsustainable for you?
When something else was a priority, let's put it this way. And I told you before, I was focused on my work a lot. And there was a moment when I was with my former mentor and the boss, and I wasn't working for him anymore, but I was at his house. And I looked at him, I was like, I admire you. You're such an amazing person. You're also dad of 3 kids. So you have a thriving family. You have a thriving business. I really want to be like you. And then I turned around and I was like, yeah, but he's a husband. And then I realized that if I want to have a family and if I want to be a mother, whatever I'm doing right now is not serving me anymore. So I need to rethink that. And I think that was the first signal. And the second signal was that before, when you're like in your 20s, you're usually not very self-aware, especially on like the body emotional level. And I entered therapy when I was 28 or 29. And I started noticing all the signals of my ADHD and also my, so I'm hypersensitive as well. So the lights, right? Lights in the office, sounds, everything. Like it's a superpower for coaching, for example, but it's not a great superpower if you sit in the office 24/7, especially WeWork. So a lot of those things started affecting me. I think they were affecting me before. I just started noticing them and not either masking them anymore or like dragging them down. So yeah, the question was like, if I want to be a mother and I have a family and I want physically and emotionally feel well and not overwhelmed or not being constantly tired, what should I do?
Well, becoming a mother will not be the opposite of being constantly tired, because that just leads you to be constantly tired.
It's a constantly tired land, exactly.
But,
the land of constantly tired.
but okay,
Yeah.
combining both would be like death tired, maybe.
I think it's also not about tired in general. So tired is on the level of my body, of my hypersensitivity, but about the motherhood. If I do something, I do it really, really well, which means that I couldn't just wing it. I couldn't just say, "Oh, I'll get a child. I'll bring them to 24/7 daycare or nanny." I want to be there for a child, and I want to be a mother that I want to be. But first, I need to figure out. I needed to figure out what kind of mother I needed to be.
Yeah,
I needed to build a sustainable relationship with my, at that point, boyfriend, in order for us to have a family, and even invest time into that, and not sit in the office and build stuff, which I love. So how do I expand myself that I can be not only my work, but I can be Olga, and work is a part of me and my family is a part of me, and maybe I have some other hobbies and things that are on the side, and I am a mother that I can respect and relate to.
And what do you do then? Did you decide to step down, or how did that evolve? I
first went into therapy about that. So I went into discussion with my therapist on what kind of mother I want to be. Then I, back in the days, I started meditating. So I've been meditating now for 12 years, no, more, 14 years, twice a day. So it's really helps a lot with ADHD, for example, but also like brings other weird stuff to your plate. I started doing yoga. I started doing more sports because that's ADHD is physical. You also need to understand that part. But also start figuring out what do I like about my job and how can I tweak and twist my job, even staying in that job first, that I can have focus elsewhere. So I spent actually, I would say, 2 or 3 years really looking at my current job and how that can be done with me being someone else as well outside of the job. And at some point the answer was like, I don't think I can. And I realized also the path of me being startup executive specifically wasn't interesting anymore. It was like, I can do that. And I think for a lot of people, that particular moment comes when they're 40. For me, because my career was so fast, that moment came to me when I was 33. The moment when you've been doing something for, like I told you, I started working when I was 16. From 16 to 33, I had a lot of years of being in a startup industry and then ending up being startup executive. I had to ask myself a question: what do I want to do when I grow up? And the answer was coaching.
And that could fit better to a model where you can be a mom, but also you can do coaching, and that you could balance these two things better than being an executive.
I think it balances, first of all, my value system. It's very close to my value system. I am emotionally, mentally challenged in a good way, meaning that it's not boring. It's every day some new stuff. And it's something that I keep doing. And I think that's a very important thing for me as well. As an ADHD person, I keep finding interesting things in executive coaching, in my work every single day that bring me back, even if I'm really frustrated or tired about this job. And it wasn't the case before. So that's the first time, I would say, in my career where I don't choose a title every 3 years or every 2 years. I'm like, okay, now I'm a marketing person, now I'm a PR person, now I'm business development, now I'm doing this, now I'm doing that. I'm like, I've been executive coach for almost 8 years now, and I still don't hate the title, and I'm still in the same job. And that says a lot about the quality of my work and the quality of my life.
What is executive coach actually, or who do you serve with this coaching? Who are your clients, and what's the first pain they have when they come to you?
I serve specifically startup industry, right? I work predominantly with either startups or scale-ups or pre-IPO companies, or also companies that want IPO. So the whole spectrum, because I come from that place. And I usually work with founders, C-level. So it's either founders and CEO or C-level as well. With the bigger companies, I also work with the VP level. The pain that they come with, it's interesting because I feel like specifically in that industry, the first and the most common one is burnout. It's like by far, I would say, the most recognized signal that something needs to change, because we push too hard and maybe we were pushing against the wall for such a long time. The other pain is conflict between founders very often, because otherwise, like, either someone goes or the company collapses or something more going to happen, etc. If we take more positive scenarios, strategies. A lot of companies, when they go through transitions, meaning like from one stage of financing to another stage, or one stage of the size of the company to another stage, something needs to shift. Needs to shift within the founding team, something needs to shift within the C-level, and then drip it down to the whole company. So the overall company strategy needs to be rebuilt, renewed, etc. So that more like positive thing, I guess, that people are coming with. New jobs, for example, changing from VC industry to becoming a founder, from being a chief marketing officer to becoming a founder, from first-time company, second-time company.
It's really different when you're a C-level and then you become a founder.
Yeah, especially human experience. It's a different human experience. Yes.
In terms of what?
Responsibility, ownership, and closeness to your identity. So before chief marketing officer was a role, yes, it was close to your identity, and if you perform badly, I guess you're not feeling great. But as soon as it's your company, and it's especially in the earlier stages, it's you. So everything what happens with the company happens with you and with your identity, and it can be very damaging and traumatizing as well. But at the same time, it can be a shift of a focus. Because, for example, let's take the example of chief product officer and chief executive officer. Chief product officer's superpower is actually listening to everyone and understanding everyone's opinion and creating a coherent picture. CEO sometimes need to tell everyone to F off, and this is the direction we're going. So there are certain situations where you act differently, think differently, you do stakeholder management differently, and it's much closer to your identity. So which means it also can hurt you worse. Yeah.
Well, I can imagine also when you are at C-level, you are in a company that has C-levels, and then you become a founder, and you have no levels. It's just like, again, small. There are no
you're doing
levels. There's
everything
no
yourself.
processes. There are no structures. You have to build them. Or maybe you don't have to build them yet, because sometimes you're in the early stage of your company. Maybe you don't have to think about structures and processes at this point. You talk also about burnout. Some people say that burnout exists when you overwork in something that you don't care, or when you overwork in something that doesn't move the needle. What is your definition of burnout?
I don't define it in this way. Well, how I defined it is where I find the client, right? And where I find the client is usually, and you can like Google for that, or people who are looking at our episode, they can Google for that, like all stages of a burnout. I usually find these people going against their values and the value system, not taking care of themselves. Result or lack of result being very close to their heart and identity, like really hitting them hard, and even questioning directions and why I'm doing this. So this is where I find people that come into coaching, or like some other helping professionals as well. Yeah.
So overworking in something that they don't, let's say, identify or care, or doesn't belong to their value system or identity.
They might just not recognize even themselves, right? Because as soon as you cross the stage of neglecting your own values, and I was at that stage as well at some point, you stop liking yourself. You stop liking the way you act, you stop liking the way you treat other people, you maybe stop liking your decisions. And then you're at the point where I was, for example, at this point with my first coach. I was thinking about that the other day. And the first session with my personal coach, with the first coach that I worked with personally as an executive, he asked me to say, I love myself. And I started crying because I couldn't.
Okay, yeah.
So to that point.
Right. Yeah, it's a hard moment to be there. So you were in a burnout, or you feel you were about to?
I was multiple times in a burnout for sure in my life. Yeah.
And how did you recover from that?
Therapy helps a lot. Coaching helps a lot. But in general, I think that first acknowledging that helps a lot. Because why people end up there, or why I specifically ended up there, is because too many things were happening too fast at the same time. Like, I needed to build a company. At the same time, I needed to move countries. At the same time, I needed to get a divorce. Like, all the things were piling up. And I was handling them and I was dealing with them. But at some point, it's just not to your human ability to hold so much pain, responsibility, and movement, right? And transitions. So that was one of my burnouts for sure. I ended up there. And recovery is acknowledging that and taking good care of yourself, right? And maybe making certain decisions which are not quote unquote popular for your inner achiever. Like in my case, for example, I stepped down from one company when I was completely burned out because I figured out I can't be really of service here. And what I'm doing is not of service to me as well at the same time. So it's like both ways. It doesn't go in one direction. It's both ways. And just took some time off, right? Or at some point I had another burnout where I couldn't step down, which means that I had to very consciously delegate like a lot out, which I usually do not delegate. Trust other people that it will be fine and not bury the company. And almost like with the calendar, no, you're checking in, checking out. You're going into your, I don't know, yoga session, or you're sleeping. You're really like sleep, right? You need to sleep at some point a lot. Or being okay with canceling all the social plans and telling people that you're burned out. Yeah. So it's really recovery mode. You need to go into this. Yeah.
Sometimes I tend to act like when I have a lot of stuff. You said that, you have the company and this and that, and plus the divorce and so on, like a lot of stuff going on. Sometimes, when I feel like that, what happens to me is that I start just letting things fail by their own. I can't hold everything, and I just start dropping the cups and the plates, and I stop caring because I'm like, I can't. And then what about that? Well, it is what it has to be. Boom, it fails. But one of the things that actually get me to one point that I was actually with a podcast where I feel sometimes a bit, I'm pushing too hard. And sometimes when you push too hard, you work so much, but you don't move the needle that much. You feel like, I just gonna drop it. I just gonna drop it, let it fail or shut it down. And you get into this moment like, I don't want to do this anymore. And it happens to me when I feel like, despite the efforts, nothing moves the needle. How do you, for example, and for someone like me, how can I cope better with that feeling?
Stop judging yourself, because what you're describing is totally normal. There are two parts, right? So you were describing two different reactions, actually. One part is when there is a lot happening, you need to drop some things. Unfortunately, this is we are not superheroes, and I really trust our inner knowing that the things that we're dropping, there will survive, or something will survive, because I've seen it multiple times within myself and my story, and also with the other people. When you have so many things going on, you need to trust certain things to go into drain, because you internally know where the priority is. And the second part is when you feel like, nothing is moving the needle, sometimes you really need to pause, go for a walk, not touch this thing for a month. Something is going to shift, because sometimes we're putting too much pressure on ourselves and our own ability to move the needle. But there's so many external factors that we sometimes do not look at or not anticipate. And sometimes just the same brain needs to move stuff from the left part to the right part for us to actually see the path out. So the both things that you're describing are totally normal. You're just judging yourself for that. So please don't.
Because I think I have put myself on maybe it's a toxic mantra.
Which is?
Make things happen. So I have this mantra already for a while of, okay, I'm gonna make this happen. The only difference between something that the place where I am and the place where I want to be, this gap, to fill this gap it's only on me. So I'm gonna make this happen, and make this happen, and trying every day to wake up and say, this is what I have to do today, or this is what I have to do this week or month. I'm gonna make it happen. But when it's feel that I'm not making it happen is when I come into this position. And then I feel like, if it's on me, if it's everything on me, what else do I need to do? What other magic spell can I put on this to make it happen? I don't know if I had put up
too much pressure on yourself.
This toxic mantra, I would say, maybe on myself.
There are two things to that, right? One is there are definitely more things into play than just you, right? So I think that's a very positive trait in people, that we take responsibility, and we take radical responsibility for ourselves and our actions. This is not toxic. This is great. It's responsibility. But then there are things outside of our responsibility. And this is one part of that. But the second part, there are so many different ways to get from A to B. I was talking to my daughter today, and we were counting, and I was like, how much is 1 + 9? And she's like, 10. How much is 2 + 8? 10. And you can go on and on about that, but basically there's no one way to get from A to B. You always have different ways. And sometimes by narrowing our mind and our focus on one particular way, in this way it needs to happen, we're actually closing ourselves from seeing so many different ways that you can go to B and make that happen. Whether it's a toxic mantra, I don't know. I like responsibility. But there are so many different ways from A to B. You can go different ways.
Yeah. You talked about authentic leadership
Mm-hmm.
at scale. What does being yourself actually means when you're under extreme pressure?
When you're under extreme pressure, you're always yourself. I think that's a misconception. More pressure you have, more yourself you are. You look at the tennis players, for example, in those moments when the stakes are the highest, like all the inner theater, you see it on the surface. It's exactly the same in high pressure environments, or in high pressure teams, especially. People are arguing, people are doing certain things that are not really nice. But when this high pressure environment stops, you can say sorry to each other and be still friends, right? I don't think it's possible to be in high pressure environment and hold the mask for too long. But then there is a question how do you not lose your values? And how do you actually still stay professional? I guess this is where we have a lot of misconception about authenticity, because people say, oh, authentic leadership. And then they sometimes think it needs to be the same style as you are in private with your friends on the couch drinking beer. But it's not. Leadership is also a specific role in your life. And yes, you can be attuned to your values. You can be the same in general person as you are with your friends, but you're still different. And discovering and developing this persona within you that on one hand doesn't go immediately off as soon as the high pressure starts, but at the same time holds the boundaries of you, who you are as a leader, into your bigger life. That's very hard, and that's an exercise. Yeah.
I told you that I'm in a job transition currently. Or I don't know if I mentioned it. My next role is also as a leader of a team.
Mm-hmm.
However, it's a team that I didn't pick, which is very different than the previous one. I was able to hire, to build a team, basically to put it in easier words, to put people I consider competent in their field, but also people I like. Now is the difference that I come as in the role of as a leader, where I didn't pick the team. What is the best piece of advice that you could give me on taking that team over?
That's still your team. Yes, you didn't pick them, but I feel like a lot of people, there are two extremes where they go into, right? They go too fast into the team and start firing people, like tailoring it to their liking, let's put it this way. The second extreme is not touching anything, just running as it is, right? And I think if you take, coming back again to responsibility, that's responsibility of you as a leader to navigate first the question, what is the goal? What is the mission for my team? And then who stays here for me and for this mission to move forward? Then you can actually see who needs to stay, who needs to go, who maybe where do you need to strengthen the relationship? Where do you need to look at the people differently? Where do you need to maybe upskill someone? Because it's not really about people only. And I think a lot of also startup founders, they make this mistake. They sometimes say, we need to find a role for Alex. But it's actually the other way around. We're building a business. Business has a role. And for this role, we need a person. So think about the mission first. Secondly, what do you want to achieve within this mission? Because sometimes we also have our personal agendas that we want to learn something new or build something, we have something personal within that. And then learn about the new people that you acquired in this perspective. If I know the mission, if I know the roles within a team, who is fitting to the roles, with whom I can't really work, who needs to be upskilled, who needs to be closer to me, etc. But it's your team. You can't outsource the responsibility to someone else.
So at the beginning, so what you're saying at the beginning, I should not come and judge. I should just come and listen,
be curious.
Learn. I'm trying to learn the first week. How do you do stuff? I'm not here to judge the way you're doing anything. I'm not going to say this is correct or this is incorrect. First, I want to learn how are you working, and then understand what's the mission. And then once I know that, we can start shifting maybe processes if they need to, or adapting roles if they need to be reassigned or adapted, or yeah.
There's one color that I want to add to that.
Yeah.
And this is the color that some people usually lose on that journey. And this is the color of power. When you are in the leadership position, you have power. And for example, like the Brené Brown, she has a new book, and she had like the four ways of power. So one is like power over, the power with, etc. But basically, you have power with the people and over these people, and not losing that and not going too much into consultative role is very, very important here. So you were brought to this position because people that hired you trusted you that you can do that, and you specifically, and this is what your power is resigning on. And then yes, you consult others, but the responsibility is on you.
What do you mean this with the consult others? I mean, I got lost in the part.
Because when you started explaining like going to different team members and talking to them and trying to understand how it works, sometimes you go more in, well, not you specifically, but I mean people in general, go more into this servant role, consultative role, like how would you think I need to do that, etc. But I think we need to start always with our own strategy and mission first. And then, of course, learn more about that from the people on the ground, because they will hold the knowledge. But build your own picture first, and it may be tailored and structured differently, but don't try to connect the picture from the stories that you hear. Try to inform it. Try to be curious about that. Yeah.
What does the power of emotional business means in practice? How do emotions drive or sometimes sabotage our performance?
I feel like we have, in general, as humans, we have a misconception that everyone else is dealing with emotions much better than we do. So any person on the tram that you're sitting next to, we usually assume that they have their shit together. Spoiler alert, they don't. And it's the same with founders. It's the same with the C-level. They all look left and right, and they feel like, for example, someone in the chief operation officer role looks at chief product officer and thinks they have it all figured out with their emotional intelligence, with how they make decisions only based on logic and not anyhow influenced by any other things. We are humans, right? And if we're not, and I don't say it in a derogatory way, so stay with me. And if you're not autistic, right, and you're a human being with all the possible spectrum of emotions, you are you're preconceived to have your own experience influencing your decisions, your own emotions influencing how you're in the room, your inner values influencing how you run business. Everything of this, like the whole emotional terrain is there. And sometimes we tend to say we throw it out of the window and we just go the logical way. And this is exactly where I find people being in depression and in a burnout, because they just misjudged how much it actually meant, what they threw out of the window. First of all, for understanding what business they want to build. Secondly, to understand what leader they want to be. Thirdly, to understand their team in general and how they are acting and what is happening there, but also their customers, all the natural conflicts that they're aligning there. Like, there's so much information that we need to incorporate sometimes.
I wonder how much of the leaders that we admire makes this or become more emotional or have better emotional competence when we drive businesses, or when we lead teams, when we have examples in society that are praised, such as Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, this guy from WeWork. They are leaders, but they not necessarily have this emotional touch with others. I mean, I have read a lot of from Steve Jobs and how he will enter meetings and how he will humiliate other people, key people there to pressure them to make something greater. However, a lot of CEOs or leaders are trying to emulate this kind of leadership that maybe worked for him because, I don't know, he was a genius, but it might not work for others. And other people are seeing this as an example of how I should lead, of how I should connect with humans in my company, and turns out to be like a disaster.
There are two different things. What you admire and who they are. And usually we do not admire people, we admire results. So when we look at Steve Jobs, and I guess there are some people that admire him, what people actually admire is the result, building the company that he built. How he did it is a different question. And then I feel like one thing is what I hear more and more from leaders, who they admire changes. It almost feels like it's an old generation that really admired Steve Jobs and the WeWork founder, I don't remember, or Travis from Uber, etc. Right? So I hear less and less than people admire them. Yes, they admire results, but how they achieve those results are not anymore the common ground, right? And then this is the question that I usually ask also the clients: what are the role models? Who am I looking at? Like, who is really that person who will look at and they would like to be that person with the results maybe that they're having as well, right? Usually when you are attuned with your emotions, or at least they're not really bothering you, let's put it this way, in a very flat way, you're moving faster, that's for sure. So any information, any data, if you have so much unstructured data that you can't really put together, of course it will slow you down. But as soon as this data streamlines and you will know your conviction and you know your ground, where you're standing, then it's much faster to move. So the work of quote unquote helping professionals is to untangle the inner data and figure out where we're actually going, where we're moving here.
Olga, one last question. When you think about all the places and the roles that you had in the past and the place that you live, which version of Olga feels most at home and why?
I like myself now a lot. I think this is what also my inner path and my inner changing and moving, getting to know me, etc. I like myself a lot now as a human being and as a professional and as a mother, etc. But if we look back, let's take a step back. I like a lot that my version, let's say when I was 25, 24, that we discussed today as well, when I was building this first company, just before we sold it, because I think she was so much lighter in so many ways and so much more curious about the world than I am sometimes right now, because I know, I'm already 40, right? I know a lot about the world and stuff like this. But I like that version of me a lot as well. Yeah.
Your young version. The hungry version would be maybe?
I never really felt hungry. Like in the traditional terms, you would call her hungry. That's true. But I think it's more about being inspired and being very open to the world and trusting the world. Like this, oh my God, the world is so big and has so much choice to offer.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now you know a bit more what do you want or what do you like. So it's like all the options are like...
You tried all the restaurants, so you're like, yeah, I can't be bothered anymore. It's like, I was saying this about, because I mentioned that already. I was married first time, so I'm married now second time. So I was like, when I was married second time, I was like, I don't want to do it anymore. Like, I don't want to date. I'm done. I'm good. I think the same with the profession. I'm like, I really don't want to switch profession. Maybe within the profession, yes. And even when it comes to my people that support me, I'm like, I don't want to change helping professional. I really want to stay with one therapist, one supervisor. Like, I've tried it all. You know, yeah.
Things that start to change when you get into the 40s, and then
yes, in many ways. Yes.
Yeah, I'm 2 months from my 40s, so a lot of things have changed. When I remembered my version of myself when I was 20, 25, 30, and now I consider already myself 40, and I have seen a lot of changes in the past 3 years of things that I like, things that I don't like. Yeah. Olga, has been a pleasure having you in the podcast. I don't know if you noticed, but I took a free coaching lesson from her a little bit. Because I had some questions for you that I wanted or was very interested in knowing about those topics. Where can people find you and what they will find?
It's very easy to find me on LinkedIn. It's Olga Skipper. You can find me there. I have a website with the same name. I also run a podcast called Emotional Business. So it's every same platforms that you are on, I guess. And they will find both my coaching practice and my Art of Work, which is a podcast, to get to know me better.
Great. Olga Skipper, thanks for being in the podcast.
Thank you, Lord.